I woke up and didn't want to craft today. But welcome back to the channel, everybody. My name is Garmin. This, of course, is the Storycraft Society. And this week, well, I guess I should say today, I woke up and I didn't want to craft today. But I walked past my years of investment into this hobby and something jumped out at me. And the something specifically was, I guess, some things. This rock scatter that I made forever ago. And then all of these random scraps of plaster rock molds that I have from various builds that I've done, both here on the channel and just for my home game. And the thing that they, I guess, sparked in me is that maybe I didn't know what I wanted to craft today. But I'll tell you, I use the heck out of these little pieces of rock scatter. They're easy to make. They were fun to make. And I really have always kind of thought the three that I have, you know, boom, boom, and boom, really aren't enough. And I'd like to have more of them. So I didn't feel like crafting anything else today. So guess what? We're making these. And rock scatter is super useful, so I think that a lot of you will get something out of this, but this is what we're making today. And I was not excited to craft before this, but I'm excited now. Let's jump into it. So I got the party started here by cutting out some bases. I just used masonite. This is nice because it just doesn't warp up, and it's really easy to use a Dremel and go over and make into interesting kind of hill-ish shapes. I mean, they're not really hill shapes. They set really flush to the table, but you get the idea. You want them to kind of be not perfect shapes, not a perfect circle, not a perfect oval, that sort of thing. And then the next thing that I'm going to do is start fitting my random pieces and see where they could go. Like this one, see, is a little too long. Let's see what we can do here. Now the shapes that I decided to go with for these are actually just based on the size bases that I created. So that actually is a little bit of a lesson there that I could have used. I have some longer pieces in here that certainly would have been better, looked nicer, all of that sort of thing. So if I would have cut my bases to fit to the pieces I had, then maybe I would have ended up with something a little nicer, but I think these will do just fine. I went for some unique placements, but always the important placement. Let me actually grab a mini real quick. The important rule in crafting terrain for your games is to always keep miniature bases in mind. So for example, when I made this little rock outcropping here, I made sure to make the space in between the rocks big enough that a base could fit in there if they wanted to hide or get cover or whatever. So with that said, all we need to do now is get these hot glued down and then we can move on to the next step. So I just had a crazy time while I was waiting for the hot glue gun to heat up because I basically was trying to run through my future steps of what I was going to do to work on these, and then I came up with the idea that I was going to use this scale 75 winter ground to blend the rocks down into the bases, and this is like my go-to stuff that I've been using recently. But then while I was waiting for the hot glue gun to dry, I was looking at my other pieces and I realized that the way that I blended these in to the bases was with the super glue and baking soda method. And then I realized the super glue and baking soda method dries immediately. The scale 75 winter ground looks great, but takes forever to dry. So we're going to jump over to using super glue and baking soda, which will get these ready to move on to the next step so much faster. Side note, I'm so used to working with foam on everything that I just forget that you can use super glue on stuff as long as you're not using foam. It's the little victories, you know? You realize something every day. Whew. So I have my super glue, I have my baking soda, 1,000-year-old baking soda, I think. There's actually not a lot left. So the fun part about this particular process is how quick you get results. With a lot of things in crafting, you have to be patient and wait. This one is fast. So what we're gonna do is take our super glue here. You're gonna find a crack. See this running down along in there. We're gonna take and run this super glue down into said crack. Then all you got to do is just take your baking soda, dump that down in, make sure it gets a nice, good, full coverage coating. Grab a little trash brush and brush that off. And now we have the seam mostly covered up. Actually, you'll notice that we've got a little gap right there where it's still sticking up. Easy enough to solve. Grab a little more super glue. Pop that down in. Bang, bang, bang. Trash brush it off. We are good to go. It's that easy. Only now that the glue and sand have dried do I realize the irony of the fact that I used super glue and baking soda to make sure that this dries really fast and gets done really quick, that I then had to sit and wait for PVA glue to dry. Some days are my days, some days are not my days. The next thing that I have to do is get my rocks all painted up. So I'm going to do a couple of things here. The first thing is I'm going to use the leopard spotting technique. That's going to be to take a yellow, a gray, and a blue and dot all over the rocks with a really, really watered down craft paint. Then I'm going to take a black wash over the whole thing. That's going to seep down into all of the crevices and bring all my definition out. And then lastly, I'm going to dry brush up with a gray and then a light gray to bring all of my highlights out. Then I'm going to be taking Mod Podge and going over the whole thing, but I'm going to be doing two different types. Around the sand, I'm going to be doing a black Mod Podge. That way I don't have to paint over that again for a base coat. And then for the rock area, so that the painting that I just did stays visible, I'm going to be going over that with a clear Mod Podge to seal that all up. The very final thing that I'm going to do is paint all of the ground texture up with a couple of various browns. I'm not putting a whole lot of effort into this because it's going to get covered up with flock anyway, but it's always nice to have that dirt color there in case the flock flakes off for some reason. So with all of that painting work done, the next thing that I need to do for these is to put the flock on the bases. Now, one thing that I really didn't like about my old ones is I used a different type of flock than the flock that I'm using now. In my head, it looked like little tiny blades of grass, but the problem that I got from it was it would end up looking like freshly mowed grass. So for me, that just doesn't work for rocks that are, out in the wild, wherever my adventurers are going to be adventuring, right? So I'm going to switch to a newer way of doing it, which is just mixing up PVA glue and green blend from Woodland Scenics. I'm going to take that and then use a putty knife to basically squish that down all over the bases to get my kind of rough, uneven grass texture. And then we got to let that dry, and we are almost to the finish line. So I spent some time putting some tufts onto the bases to get them all decorated up and get them looking just perfect. And that was basically it for this whole project. I'm gonna say it because I really feel like it is worth saying. This is a project that I didn't want to do because I woke up today and I didn't feel like crafting today. Even though I had the time, even though I had the energy, I just didn't feel like doing it. I settled on doing these little rock bits. I really like these little rock bits. And now I have these cool pieces today that I can drop onto my table forever. And here is the kicker. And I think this is maybe where I'm coming from, that this is the end all of this video, right? These are gonna see so much more table time than that church up there. That took me a ton of time, like a week's worth of work. This took me just one day, if you don't include dry time, just a couple of hours. And I'm gonna see so much more use out of these. So, with that said, take away what you will, but for me, I'm realizing that any day that you feel like you just don't wanna craft, maybe do, but realign. Craft something different than what you thought you had to craft. Don't make some big elaborate thing. Just make a little piece of scatter terrain. I'm pretty sure that you'll be happy that you did. So, with that said, hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you did, definitely leave me a like down below. Leave me a comment of a piece of scatter terrain that you've had an experience like this with. Definitely subscribe to the channel if you haven't. It's absolutely free, and if you don't like the content, you can always unsubscribe, but I figure if you like this video, you're gonna like the other things that we put out as well. Share this video with a friend. That is the best way to help a small YouTube channel out. I really can't say it enough to all of you who have shared the videos. Thank you so much. But that's all I have for this week. So until next week, I'll be seeing you.